Hey, so before we begin, I gotta say, my mom's worked in an office her whole life, so this stories hit close to home. This isn't just some content for clicks, it's this about real experiences people live through. I want folks to see themselves in the stories and maybe avoid the pain others already went through. Oh, and yeah, all names, companies, and details are fictional. Let's get into it.
I caught the sound before I saw it, the soft thwump of paper hitting wet grounds. You'd think it wouldn't register, but when you spend 6 years giving a damn about every decimal point, every calibration error, every compliance threshold, that sound lands like a slap. I stood just past the doorway, half turned, pretending to check my phone. But I was watching Lauren toss my raise request into the trash like it was a flyer for a lost cat. She didn't even hesitate. Still holding her coffee cup in the other hand, still grinning from whatever smug little moment she'd manufactured in her head. And it wasn't just the discard, it was the way she did it, like it amused her. Like my signature, my careful formatting, the data I'd included to back it up, all of it was some kind of punchline. I didn't say a word, didn't storm back in. I let the door swing closed behind me, walked down the hallway, and sat at my desk like nothing had happened. But something had. You don't throw away 6 years of loyalty in front of someone and expect them to smile through it. By the way, if you're listening and stories like this hit home, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. I know 97% of you don't, but it really helps our team keep these stories coming. Thanks. Now, back to that moment. I stared at my monitor, blinking at a spreadsheet that might as well have been written in Sanskrit. I wasn't even reading it. I was replaying every single late night I stayed logged in just to double-check sensor drift logs, every time I covered for the QA team because some Ivy League consultant botched the test schema. Every moment I stayed quiet and just fixed it, because fixing it mattered more than being seen doing it. Lauren had been my manager for barely a year. Before that, I'd reported directly to the CTO who actually understood what I did. He left right before the acquisition. Lauren had floated in on a cloud of LinkedIn buzzwords and smug confidence, immediately started renaming teams and creating impact maps. She didn't ask questions, just gave commands. And I was the fool who thought merit still counted, that maybe someone would open their mouth and say, "Hey, look what she's done. Look how far we've come because of her work." But no, the truth is quieter. It's passive-aggressive smiles and trashed paper. It's your contributions getting folded into slide decks that don't mention your name. I sat there in silence, letting the cold realization settle. This place, this version of EverArc, didn't see me. Not really. I was a checkbox, a bullet point in someone else's accomplishment log. She thought it was over the second she let go of that paper. But what Lauren didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the signature she mocked wasn't just for HR. It was the same signature tied to a patent I'd quietly converted back to sole ownership after they missed their own renewal deadline. I never told a soul. I just followed the rules. Their rules. And the clause? The one that gave engineers full rights to inventions developed outside funded R&D. Still in effect. Still binding. Still signed by a CTO who had no idea his legacy would become the only legal lifeline I'd need. So I sat there, surrounded by open browser tabs and diagnostics charts, heartbeat slowing. I wasn't angry. Not yet. What I felt was something colder, something heavier, like the realization that you've been sleepwalking through a fire drill and suddenly the flames are real. I didn't rush, didn't slam anything, just opened a clean doc, typed a 2-sentence resignation letter, signed it. Then I walked to the printer, pulled the page, folded it once, and headed back toward her office. She was in a call. I didn't care. I slid the letter onto her desk, gave it the gentlest tap with my fingers, and turned around. No goodbye, no drama. Just the quiet thud of my steps down the hallway, one foot after another, away from 6 years of being invisible, and into something else entirely. She thought I'd swallow it, that I'd slink back to my cubicle and bury myself in bug reports, maybe bring her a status update with a smile like nothing happened. But what she didn't know, what no one at EverArc bothered to remember, is that while they were out giving keynote talks and adding thought leader to their bios, I was quietly filing forms, updating registries, reading every line of that crusty old employment contract they shoved across the table 6 years ago. Clause 7.2 was barely legible, buried on page 9 somewhere between non-disclosures and lab safety protocols. but it was the most important sentence in my career. It said, in legalese so dry it could start a brush fire, that any IP developed off hours without internal grants or financial sponsorship defaulted to the engineer. Not Everark, not the CTO. Me. And that algorithm, the one they based their entire sensor suite on, I built it in a basement apartment with a space heater next to my desk and a cracked version of MATLAB on a secondhand laptop. The company didn't even know I was working on it until I dropped a prototype into the dev repo one night and solved their cascading error issue in a single commit. They celebrated, toasted, put a line in the shareholder letter about proprietary stability layer developed by our internal integrity team. But they never filed the paperwork properly, just used it, deployed it, built on top of it, and then forgot I existed. The only reason I knew their renewal window had lapsed was because I kept a burner Gmail linked to the provisional patent alerts. When the grace period expired, I refiled it under my own name. No fanfare, no announcement, just notarized, signed, and sealed. Filed from my personal account. They didn't notice. They never notice. Because they assume you're just grateful to have a chair in the room. Lauren, especially. She came in swinging, all bark and quarterly OKRs. Never once asked how the algorithm worked. Just expected it to stay invisible and functional, like plumbing. Something she could point at in a slide deck and call our tech. So when she laughed at my signature, she wasn't just mocking a name. She was mocking the one thing keeping their flagship product from collapsing under its own complexity. And that resignation letter I slid onto her desk, it wasn't just an exit notice, it was a trigger. Citing Clause 18C, the IP release clause, the one that formally separates proprietary inventions from the company the moment the creator exits voluntarily. No lawsuit, no negotiation, just a clean legal handoff. I made sure to include the date and version history, signed it with the same cute signature she laughed at. I didn't wait to see her face. I didn't need to. I walked out the side door, bypassed the front desk, and got into my car without looking back. Not even once. I knew exactly what was about to happen. Not immediately, not loudly, but slowly, like a hairline fracture creeping through the foundation of a house everyone thinks is still solid. Let them keep smiling. The ground was already shifting. I didn't sleep that night. Not out of nerves, God no, but because I wanted every detail perfect. I pulled out the old file directory I kept backed up on 2 separate drives, created the appendix, logged every time my algorithm had been deployed, referenced, patched, or bundled inside firmware updates, down to the hour. I included emails, ticket threads, Git commits, Slack exports, and even one internal deck where a now promoted VP referred to it as our secret sauce. I titled that section, Prior Use Timeline. Then I opened a new tab, found the last email from Daniel Cheng at Helix and Tech, and replied. Simple subject, re-inquiry about my stabilization protocol. No pleasantries, just the facts. Attach the patent summary. Attach the notarized refile. Attach the usage log. The body of the email was only 1 sentence long. Let me know if you're still interested. Helixson had approached me twice, once via a recruiter, once at a conference. Both times I said no, not because I wasn't tempted, but because I still thought Everark would do right by me. That if I just kept showing up and doing excellent work, someone would notice. But I wasn't interested in notice anymore. I was interested in leverage. Helixson replied in less than 3 hours. Can we schedule a call for 9 a.m.? In the meantime, please find attached our intent letter, offer enclosed. I opened the document and had to read it twice. It was clean. No loopholes, no gross clauses about clawbacks or equity traps. 7 figures wired within 5 business days upon transfer, plus a supplemental clause offering first look rights on future diagnostic enhancements. I didn't even need to negotiate. I just signed. The moment the DocuSign pinged back as complete, I felt something shift. Not adrenaline, not excitement. Just a low, cold hum of certainty, the kind you only feel when you know you just turned a key that can't be unturned. The patent transfer package was uploaded securely to their legal portal within the hour. It included my lab notes, my version control logs, my test outputs, everything they'd need to build around it, optimize it, own it. And as of that morning, Everark no longer had that right. They didn't know it yet, wouldn't for days, maybe even weeks. Not until something broke or someone actually read the resignation letter that was probably still sitting under a venti caramel macchiato on Lauren's desk. But I knew. And Helixson, they knew too. They knew exactly what they had just bought, and they weren't wasting time. Within the first 12 hours, I had 3 emails from their engineering lead, already talking about rollout options and backward integration paths. Their velocity was surgical. It reminded me of how things used to be at EverArc, back when people cared more about performance than politics, before the consultants, before the brand repositioning, before the endless stand-ups where no one stood for anything. I leaned back in my chair, sipping coffee from the same chipped mug I used during my basement build days. The one with the fading sticker that said, "Stability is not optional." I thought about all the meetings I sat through where my algorithm was discussed like it was just some passive piece of code, not the keystone, not the thing keeping their scanner from drifting 5 degrees during high-load diagnostics, not the difference between a $7,000 claim and a clean bill of health. They never understood what they had. Helixson did. And now, they owned it. The first domino fell on a Wednesday. It was a minor update, just a quarterly firmware rollout meant to fix a couple low-priority UI glitches and optimize battery reporting for the portable units. Nothing anyone thought twice about. They pushed it live during lunch. By 2 p.m., half the scanners in the Northeast region were flagging calibration mismatches. At first, they assumed it was a caching issue, something local. IT ran resets, cleared queues, even rolled back a few test units. But then West Virginia lit up, then Ohio, then Pennsylvania. Same issue, different models. They didn't understand what was missing. The stabilization layer, the algorithm I'd written, the one quietly patching sensor offsets between unit batches, was gone. Or, more specifically, legally unavailable. It wasn't just a block of code you could dig out from an old repo and Frankenstein back into place. It had version dependencies, kernel hooks, and embedded security that only I knew how to map. Lauren was still trying to manage the narrative. Told product to keep messaging calm while she called IT herself. Apparently convinced someone had accidentally deleted a critical module. Then she emailed me. Twice. Then came the call. I didn't pick up. What exactly was she going to say? "Oops, my bad for throwing out your raise request and mocking your signature. Could you come back and fix our multi-million-dollar calibration collapse?" She followed with a text. "Hi, just wondering if you've seen the issue with the 4.0.2 patch. Call me when you can." I turned my phone face down and went back to stirring my tea. By Thursday, support was underwater. Calls were getting routed to engineering. Clients were demanding field replacements. Hospitals were threatening breach of contract notices because the readings on scans were fluctuating beyond FDA tolerances. One regional partner filed an incident report stating that 5 units failed mid-diagnostic in one afternoon. The report used the word unacceptable 7 times. Back at HQ, they were in full scramble mode. Legal got involved. Compliance was pulled into a war room meeting. Someone had the genius idea of pulling the last stable build before the error cascade, version 3.9.1, except no one could find the final deployment package, not the right one anyway, because the integrity logs, the master hash table, and the complete test verification report for that build were all stored under my restricted directory, a directory that was deactivated the moment my voluntary resignation processed. And that version? It was now officially Helixson's property. I wasn't in breach. I hadn't taken anything. I hadn't cloned their system or distributed internal docs. I'd simply executed a contract clause they'd forgotten existed and reclaimed what was mine. By Friday, someone posted a desperate message on the internal QA forum. Did we lose access to Simon's IP? The thread got buried quickly, moderated out by the comms team, but not before a few engineers screenshotted it and passed it around. I got one of those screenshots emailed to me by an old coworker. No message, just the image. I read it once, let out the softest exhale, and closed the tab. It was surreal, really. Watching the house I helped build crack along fault lines I'd warned them about years ago. But I didn't feel vindicated. I felt done. Like I'd finally shut the last tab on a browser that had been running in the background of my life for too long. EverArc wanted to pretend I never existed. Now they'd get to live in a world where that was true. They booked the conference room like they always did in a crisis. No subject line, just mandatory product review, all hands. The kind of invite that makes people skip lunch and bring their laptops balanced on one arm. I heard later that the CTO walked in late with his collar wrinkled and a half-eaten granola bar in one hand. He didn't even sit. Just opened with, "All right, where the hell's the rollback?" Lauren, ever the showrunner, clicked into a slideshow like it was a routine briefing. "It's a minor regression, likely related to the test harness. We're working on a patch this week." She was maybe 3 slides in when someone from legal interrupted. Not rudely, not loudly, just one of those interruptions that slices the air. "Sorry, who filed this?" she asked, pointing at the resignation letter projected on the screen. A murmur moved across the room like static. Lauren stiffened. "That's just..." She cited some clause, irrelevant. "We've got IT recovering the previous release." "No," the attorney said, scrolling. Clause 18C. That's the IP separation clause. The CTO raised his hand to pause the room. "Wait, what's separated?" Legal leaned forward, scanning her tablet. Then she stopped. Just stopped. "Oh my God," she said. She tapped something, looked up, and said flatly, "She owned it. The algorithm, the stabilization protocol. She owned it." The head of compliance, bless his poor, panicked heart, opened his laptop and started searching. A few seconds later, he turned his screen around to show the CTO. There it was. Patent number 8782434A, refiled 6 months ago, under my name, with notarization, with transfer logs, and at the bottom, license granted to Helix and Tech Corporation, exclusive. Someone exhaled hard through their nose. Another person muttered, "You've got to be kidding me." Lauren didn't say a word. Her jaw tightened, but she didn't open her mouth. The CTO looked like he'd been hit in the sternum. "She didn't tell us." "She didn't have to," compliance said. "Not under Clause 7.2 if it wasn't funded and she filed independently, she had full rights. We just never updated the contract." Someone pulled up my last weekly report, still pinned to the engineering channel, time-stamped the Friday before I resigned. Version 3.9.1 complete. All tests passed. Signed off under Clause 18C. They hadn't even opened it. They'd been running on borrowed code, blindfolded, and didn't even know. The CTO sat down slowly, fingers steepled, eyes vacant. "How much of our infrastructure depends on this?" The engineering lead said nothing. Just opened the dependency map. It wasn't just a part of the scanner. It was everything that touched calibration, QA automation, real-time diagnostics, and error suppression. It was in the mobile app, the testing suite, the hardware, firmware, even the factory setup tools. It had metastasized. Lauren finally spoke. "Can't we just rebuild it?" The CTO didn't answer, just turned to legal and said, "Can we use it?" Legal didn't flinch. Not anymore, not legally, not without triggering an IP violation. And then came the real kick in the teeth, the metadata. On every release build since v3.0, my name was embedded in the commit logs, the encryption seeds, and the internal attributions, inventor of record, every time, every device, every update, because I had insisted years ago on signing every stable release myself, quietly, for tracking purposes, and they'd left it there. Untouched. My name was everywhere. They just hadn't looked. I was somewhere along the Black Elk Trail when it happened, boots covered in red dust, pack soaked with sweat, half a Cliff Bar melting in my jacket pocket. No service for hours. No Slack pings. No passive-aggressive calendar invites. Just the wind pushing through the trees like it had better places to be. When I reached the summit, my phone finally lit up. 6 missed notifications, 3 news alerts, 1 headline. Helixin unveils. Precision Sync TM Stabilization Breakthrough sets new diagnostic standard. I didn't even tap it. Didn't need to. I knew exactly what was inside. My algorithm, fully deployed, cleaned up, retooled with Helixin's hardware, already benchmarked at 30% faster throughput and 12% lower error margins across device classes. Everything EverArc had been promising investors for 2 years but never actually delivered. Now it was real, in someone else's hands, under someone else's banner, and fully legally theirs. I sat on a flat stone, let the wind cool the back of my neck, and just watched the notifications pour in. Someone tagged me in a LinkedIn post. Another person, someone I hadn't spoken to since the holiday party 3 years ago, sent a vague congrats message like they were hoping I'd throw them a rope to the next thing. And then came the forwarded email. Subject: we need to talk about the raise request. It was a chain. Leaked, apparently. Started with the CTO forwarding the original scanned copy of my raise request to the executive team. He circled Lauren's handwritten comment at the bottom. Cute signature. He didn't write much, just one line under it. This just cost us 5 market points, and our lead in the diagnostics vertical. According to the email thread, he'd thrown a binder across the table in the last meeting, shattered a mug. Lauren tried to defend herself, claimed she didn't understand the implications, that it wasn't her fault legal missed the clause, that she assumed I was bluffing. But they weren't buying it. She was gone within a month. Internal memo, leadership transition, external spin, pursuing new opportunities. But everyone inside knew. The woman who'd giggled over my signature, who binned my raise request like a receipt from lunch, was now officially the punchline in every hallway whisper. The kicker? They couldn't do a damn thing about it. EverArc's lawyers dug through the archives trying to find something, anything, that would let them claw back what I'd signed away. But they'd missed every filing deadline, every contestable window. They never even sent me a cease and desist, because they knew. The clause was clean. The transfer was valid. The IP was gone. And Helixon? They weren't just using it. They were thriving with it. Their investor update went live that week. Stock up 8%, press coverage glowing, analysts calling it a seismic leap in calibration accuracy. Meanwhile, EverArc's board was scrambling. Rumors of restructuring, product delays, lawsuit threats from their own clients. They were still patching firmware, still chasing ghosts through outdated test logs. And me? I was 10 miles into a trail with no service, no obligations, and the clearest head I'd had in 6 years. The real price of disrespect isn't measured in lawsuits or HR memos. It's what happens when the person you laughed at decides they're done being invisible and takes everything you depended on with them. It had been 3 months since I walked out of EverArc and signed the future over to someone who knew what to do with it. 3 months since I'd touched a build log, updated a calibration profile, or heard Lauren's voice slice through a conference call like she was doing us all a favor just by existing. I thought it was behind me. But then, one night, I got a message from a former coworker, someone who used to eat lunch 2 cubes down, always brought in extra snacks, always knew when someone was about to quit before HR did. His message was short. They still blame you, even though they know. No context. No, hey, how are you? Just that. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I already knew exactly what he meant. EverArc had entered its quiet collapse. The CEO, always more of a speaker than a builder, had tried to spin it clean in their latest investor call. Said it was a miscommunication around internal innovation policies and an unfortunate lapse in succession planning. He even threw in some jargon about IP stewardship, like the whole thing was a clerical oversight, but people weren't stupid. By then, the story had leaked, not just internally. A journalist at MedTech Insider had published a full breakdown. They'd gotten screenshots, meeting transcripts. Even the raise request, creased and coffee-stained, had made its way into the article, right there in high res, reviewed by management. It hit Reddit, then LinkedIn, then Twitter. The comment sections lit up like a bonfire of schadenfreude. They didn't even try to dispute it. Instead, they slowed down. Every new firmware build came with layers of red tape. Every deployment had to be re-verified by 2 teams, then legal, then someone in marketing who barely understood what a checksum was. Confidence evaporated. The engineers who'd once pushed code on instinct were now frozen in analysis paralysis. And the product? It stopped evolving. Meanwhile, Helixon surged. They weren't just ahead, they were sprinting. My algorithm wasn't their endpoint, it was their launch pad. Within 8 weeks, they'd rolled out 3 iterations, each one cleaner, faster, more intuitive. Hospitals were switching, clinics were calling, analysts were shifting their projections. EverArc had led the diagnostics field for almost a decade. Now they were bleeding market share to a company that knew exactly how to spot opportunity when it walked through the door. And me? I was quiet, removed, not gloating, just watching. I'd started working again, part-time, consulting for a startup that actually listened. People who asked questions, who sent thank you emails without being prompted. It felt strange at first, like kindness was a trick, but it wasn't. They just weren't EverArc. That night, after reading the message, I poured a drink, opened a blank email, and typed one line to the only person who ever truly understood what I'd done. My old mentor, Caroline. Subject, closure. Body, lesson learned, silence is leverage. I hit send, closed the laptop, and stepped outside. The air was cold. The stars were sharp. For the first time in years, I felt no weight on my back, not even the good kind. It came through a third party, an independent technology consultant, which is corporate speak for, we need plausible deniability while we beg for what we blew up. The message was polished, vague, and a little desperate. Said they were exploring pathways to strategic re-engagement and open to discussing licensing arrangements that would restore access to critical infrastructure. Translation. EverArc wanted their algorithm back, except it wasn't theirs. Not anymore. I didn't reply. Didn't even open the attached proposal. Forwarded it straight to Helixson's legal team with a short note. Flagged for response. They took it from there. 2 days later, Helixson's reply was delivered. Formal, thorough, and ice cold. Yes, licensing was technically possible. Under new terms, new rates, quarterly audit access, fee tiers tied to usage thresholds, non-exclusivity locked in. All IP modifications would remain Helixson's property, and any attempt to reverse engineer or replicate would trigger immediate contract termination and legal action. In other words, you'll pay through the nose and we'll be watching. EverArc declined, of course. Not officially, not in writing. But the next week, I heard they started pulling together an internal skunkworks project to build a new stabilization layer. I could already imagine the meetings, whiteboards full of acronyms, consultants billing hourly to reinvent a wheel that didn't want to roll for them anymore. But it didn't matter. By the time they pivoted, their client base had already started drifting. The hospitals that used to tolerate EverArc's delay cycles and firmware tantrums were now working with Helixson reps who didn't dodge questions. Clinics were migrating their back-end software. Procurement officers were adjusting long-term contracts. Even their marketing language started to change, more vague, less confident. The core of EverArc's product, the thing that once made it viable, competitive, trusted, wasn't just gone. It had evolved without them. I watched it happen from a distance, like someone observing a building you used to live in slowly getting stripped for parts. Familiar shape, same address, but hollowed out. And as for Lauren, she'd vanished off the company page weeks before. No LinkedIn post, no farewell note, just gone. I wondered sometimes if she ever thought back to that moment. The smirk, the joke, the flick of her wrist as she dropped my raise request into the trash like it was a napkin from lunch. She had no idea what she was throwing away. It wasn't just paper. It was the one person keeping the floor from cracking beneath her. All they had to do was not laugh, not mock, not treat my work like it was a punchline. But they did. And now they were learning, in quarterly reports and client exit surveys and lines of budget marked competitive losses, what that kind of arrogance costs. It hangs just above my desk, right between the first blueprint of the algorithm and a blurry photo from the day I finished the prototype. A simple sheet of paper, white now faded to the color of cold oatmeal, creased in 2 places and stained faintly near the corner, where someone's lukewarm coffee bled through the fibers. The race request. The one Lauren laughed at. The one she never read. I pulled it from the trash before I left, folded it neatly, tucked it into my bag like a relic. I didn't know what I'd do with it at the time. Maybe I just needed proof that it really happened, that the person I'd become didn't imagine it. But now, framed in glass and hung with intention, it says more than 1,000 exit interviews ever could. At the bottom, in blue ballpoint ink, you can still see her handwriting. Tiny, dismissive, reviewed by management. I crossed it out. A single red line, sharp and deliberate. Beneath it, I wrote in capital letters, reviewed by market. And the market had spoken. The scanner line that once made EverArc an industry name had been eclipsed. Their next-gen platform barely made it past beta. Customers remembered. Partners remembered. Even job applicants remembered, because no one wants to tie their future to a company with that kind of stain on its record. Meanwhile, Helixson expanded the algorithm into 2 new verticals. I stayed on as an advisor, quietly. No profile page, no press release. Just my name on the legal docs and the check that hit my account every quarter like clockwork. Sometimes I still get messages from former Everark employees, most of them short. A few apologies, a couple of wish I'd known notes. One just said, "You were right," but I don't respond. I don't need to, because the point was never revenge, it was proof. Proof that being quiet doesn't mean being weak, that doing your job well, even invisibly, doesn't mean your work can be dismissed, and that when someone mocks your value like it's a joke, they've just handed you the sharpest leverage you'll ever need. Respect isn't earned with titles. It's lost with a chuckle, and bought back at a price they can't afford. Not in meetings, not in memos, but in ink. Permanent, unforgiving, and unmistakably mine.